Welcome to my YouTube channel, where concealed narratives and unspoken journeys from the realm of crossdressing emerge into the open. Remember to like, subscribe, and activate that notification bell so you stay connected to every single instant. Have you ever longed to begin anew inside an entirely different form? The inquiry lingered in the pristine pale chamber, keen and frigid like the aroma of medical cleanliness. Dr. Evelyn Reed's speech remained steady, a tranquil surface concealing profound mysteries. I perched on the border of a hide seat, my joints pale as I clutched my knees. The buzz of the overhead illumination resembled a tool piercing my head. If you could emerge completely renewed, form and essence, would you surrender all you currently possess for that opportunity? She urged, her gaze locking with mine. They were sharp, disturbingly insightful eyes. My designation was Kevin. I was 32, employed as a financial recorder. My days formed a procession of uniform dull containers. The workspace enclosure I occupied, the vehicle I operated, the solitary dwelling I returned to each evening. I existed as a spirit within my own days. A peripheral figure so faint that gazes glided across me. Associates misplaced my title. The beverage server at my regular cafe never recalled my selection. I represented the human version of neutral wall covering. Each dawn I would confront the glass, and an unknown figure would return my stare. He was a male of average stature with receding chestnut locks, a gentle chin contour, and eyes holding a constant expression of regret. He dressed in practical trousers and fastened tops that never conformed properly. I understood rationally that the image was myself, but I did not connect with him. He resembled a disguise I could never discard, a character I was compelled to portray without receiving directions. The genuine me remained confined somewhere profound within, smothered beneath layers of ordinariness and quiet. The revelation occurred on a Tuesday evening, indistinguishable from any preceding evening. I browsed the digital network, the azure glow from the display lighting dust particles swirling in the gloom of my dwelling. Then an announcement appeared. It was streamlined, basic, and completely peculiar. The HOPE Project, Thorough Genetic Reconstruction Treatment. Below, in smaller lettering, transform into who you were destined to become. My immediate reaction deemed it fraudulent. Some advanced technological deception aimed at the desperate. I nearly dismissed it, but one term captured me. Reconstruction, not modification, not procedure. Reconstruction, the total rebuilding of an entity. The concept seemed ridiculous, an imaginative tale, but in the solitary hush of my dwelling, it embedded a kernel, a bold, alarming, and invigorating kernel of potential. What if it proved genuine? For 3 days, the notion dominated me during duties while processing figures on a data sheet. My thoughts would wander. What would it resemble to possess an altered countenance, an altered tone? To enter a space and have individuals genuinely notice you? The longing I had suppressed for ages started surfacing, intense and pressing. It was that longing that prompted me to select the connection, complete the advisory document, and schedule a meeting. It resembled a hazy vision, like I operated automatically. The medical center occupied an ordinary, transparent structure in the central district. The reception zone resembled an egg interior. All pale curves, gentle illumination, and subdued quiet. It contained individuals resembling me. I realized, not in physique, but in spirit. I could detect it in their gazes, a recognizable blend of dread and fierce, core-deep desire. An aged male with a defeated curve to his posture. A youthful female who twisted her fingers as though wishing to escape her own covering. We all shared the identical purpose. We sought an exit from our current selves. When a caregiver summoned my title, my pulse pounded against my ribs. She escorted me to the chamber where Dr. Reed awaited. It was the chamber where she would pose that existence-altering inquiry. She described the procedure in a neutral medical manner that rendered the unfeasible seem feasible. She discussed genetic mapping, cell renewal, and chemical adjustment. She employed terms I failed to grasp, but the core message was evident. They could dismantle you to your fundamental core and reconstruct you as someone fresh. This exceeds surface adjustment, Kevin, she stated, her stare unwavering. "We are not merely modifying your exterior. We are altering your physical makeup, your mental processes, the manner you interpret existence, and the manner existence interprets you. It forms a total metamorphosis. And because of that," she halted, permitting the significance of her following words to settle, "there exists no reversal. No individual has ever reversed." A tremor, heated and chilled simultaneously, traced along my back. It represented a blend of absolute dread and captivating thrill. She informed me I could modify anything, everything. My stature, my tone, my structure, my sex, the precise way my thoughts processed ideas and sensations. I departed the medical center in a daze. The urban pathways felt illusory. The noises of movement and crowds seemed muffled and remote. I returned home and positioned myself in my dim family area. My thoughts racing, I sealed my eyes and attempted to envision it. What if I ceased being Kevin, the ordinary financial recorder? What if I became someone different? I pictured an altered form, slim, elegant, a form that advanced with assurance instead of shuffling with regret. I pictured a tone that was distinct and musical, one that individuals would pause and heed. I pictured traversing a pathway and sensing presence, genuine, not as a male, not as Kevin, but as a female. The notion emerged unexpectedly, but it struck with the impact of enlightenment. A female, elegant, observed, acknowledged. The vision proved so vivid, so potent it caused me pain. I opened my eyes and moved to the tall mirror near my sleeping area entrance. In the faint illumination, my image formed a hazy outline. I could not distinguish the traits of the male I was expected to embody. I could only perceive the boundary of a confinement. I murmured the inquiry into the gloom, the terms feeling strange and substantial on my tongue. If I ceased being me, could I achieve greater contentment? The quiet that replied was, for the initial time, filled not with hopelessness, but with a frightening, shimmering fragment of optimism. The 7 days that followed became a haze of restless nights and painful days. The selection remained a steady conflict in my thoughts, a struggle between the known suffering I recognized and the alarming assurance of uncertainty. The male in the glass observed me each dawn, his eyes begging. Was he begging me to rescue him or to release him? I could not determine. Ultimately, it was the overwhelming burden of another decade of this identical dull existence that decided for me. I could not endure it. I could not confront 30 additional years of invisibility. I contacted the medical center. When I sat facing Dr. Reed once more, the approval document extended between us on the glossy surface. My hand shook so violently I could scarcely grip the writing tool. The papers were dense with official language and biological cautions. But one expression stood prominent in bold lettering. The procedure is permanent. Once we commence, there exists no retreat. Kevin, Dr. Reed said, her tone soft yet resolute. A concluding verification on the route to a fresh existence. I examined the signing section. This marked it. The end of Kevin. The arrival of someone different. I drew a profound, unsteady breath and inscribed my title. The recognizable curves and lines of my signature resembled an alien script. It represented the final action Kevin would ever perform. What designation would you prefer? Dr. Reed inquired gently, as though inquiring about my meal preference. The term arrived to me immediately, the identical one that had resonated in my thoughts since that initial evening. Hope, I murmured. She offered a faint grin. Fitting. Let us commence. Hope. In the treatment area, a caregiver prepared my limb. The needle delivered a minor sharp prick of reality. As the calming agent entered my bloodstream, a refreshing, agreeable numbness extended through my limbs. The final sight was Dr. Reed's features gazing downward at me, her expression neutral. The final sound was the steady, pulsing tone of the vital monitor, each pulse growing slower, more remote, until everything dissolved into darkness. And then the vision commenced. It was not a vision of visuals, but of pure feeling. I floated in a warm, obscure sea. A blaze ignited in my bloodstream. a fluid warmth that reached every cell, dismantling me particle by particle. It caused no pain. It exceeded discomfort. It represented a sensation of being dismantled. I sensed my skeletal structure dissolving and reforming, extending and contracting into fresh arrangements. My head felt like pliable material being molded by tender, persistent forces. My covering tingled as though millions of minute points were weaving a fresh pattern over my previous one. Voices murmured at the border of my awareness. A group of unclear noises that gradually merged into one distinct tone. It was a female tone, and it belonged to me. It summoned my fresh title repeatedly, like a repeated phrase. Hope, hope, hope. I envisioned myself positioned in a meadow of pale snow beneath a blank pale sky. I gazed downward at my hands, and they were lengthy and refined with light, unmarked covering. I sensed a heaviness on my torso I had never known before, and a flow of something gentle and substantial down my back. Locks. My locks were extended. The tone in my head whispered, "This is you now." The shift from the vision condition to awareness was gradual, like emerging from the deepest ocean section. The initial awareness was the sensation of the coverings against my covering. They felt altered, gentler. My complete form felt more responsive, as though a layer of padding had been stripped. I attempted to swallow, and the feeling in my throat was wholly strange. I produced a minor noise, a soft murmur, and the sound that emerged was not my own. It was higher, lighter. I froze, my pulse beginning to race. The rhythm of it felt altered, quicker. A wild creature striking against a fresh enclosure. I sensed the gentle heaviness on my torso again, and this time I was alert enough to comprehend it. Bosoms. They were modest, but they were unquestionably present. I shifted my hand, the motion feeling strangely smooth and refined, and contacted my torso through the thin medical covering. The sensation was so foreign, so startling that I inhaled sharply. The sound of that inhalation, womanly and airy, sent another shock through me. My hands explored further. My sides felt broader, my middle slimmer. My covering was sleek, nearly without growth. I ran my fingers through my locks, and they were extended, spilling over the cushion like smooth material. This was not a vision. This was genuine. I gradually, warily opened my eyes. The chamber was bathed in gentle dawn illumination. Everything appeared identical, but I observed it through altered eyes. My sight seemed keener, the hues more vivid. A glass had been positioned on the wall straight across from my sleeping area, and within it, an unknown person stared back at me. She possessed large hazel eyes, expanded with a blend of terror and amazement. My eyes, but not hers. Her features formed a heart shape, with elevated cheekbones and gentle, plump lips. Her covering was light and clear. Her extended dark chestnut locks formed a disordered halo around her head. She was attractive, and she was me. A figure entered the reflection, and I turned my head to see Dr. Reed positioned near the entrance, holding records. She offered a small professional grin. "Welcome back, Hope," she said. My title, my fresh title, spoken openly. Hearing it directed at her, at me, shattered the final remnants of my doubt. A sob caught in my new, unfamiliar throat. It was a rough, raw noise. Moisture flowed down my face, hot against my new, gentle covering. I was weeping, but I did not know the cause. Was it for the delight of this impossible fresh beginning? Or was it for the sorrow of the male I had eliminated to arrive here? Perhaps it was for both. I was Hope now, and I was completely, utterly, frighteningly solitary. The initial several days formed a confusing haze of revelation. The medical center served as my protective shell, a secure zone where I could stumble and absorb without criticism. Every single element represented a fresh encounter, a lesson in how to exist in this alien form. The basic action of breathing felt altered. My breathing capacity seemed reduced. The rise and fall of my torso more refined. Shifting my limbs, turning my head, every movement carried a strange, unfamiliar elegance. My guide through this fresh domain was a youthful medical helper named Liam. He possessed a kind, relaxed grin, and gentle eyes that never displayed a trace of astonishment or criticism. He was assigned to aid me with my bodily readjustment, as the medical center termed it. He served as my anchor. "All right, Hope. Simply rise gradually," he said on the initial day, his tone steady and supportive. I pushed myself to a seated position, the medical covering feeling fragile and revealing. I swung my limbs over the side of the sleeping area. They appeared impossibly lengthy and refined. My balance point was entirely different when I attempted to stand. I swayed like a newborn creature, my limbs trembling. I would have fallen if Liam had not supported my arm. "Whoa, take it easy," he said, his hold solid and stable. His contact sent a peculiar shock through me, a warmth that extended up my limb. I sensed a flush rise along my neck and into my cheeks, a hot, tingling feeling I had never known before. I was embarrassed, flustered. "It is fine," he said, seeming to notice my reaction. "It requires time for everyone. Your form's proportions, your muscular structure. It is all fresh. You simply need to discover your equilibrium." He devoted hours to me, patiently assisting me in pacing up and down the corridor of the suite. Initially, I shuffled. My limbs held outward for stability. Then, I took hesitant, awkward strides. He instructed me to transfer my weight to my sides to permit my limbs to swing naturally. With every circuit, I sensed a little less like an intruder in my own covering. One afternoon, while I focused on positioning one foot before the other, I caught my image in the glossy surface of a sealed entrance. I saw a youthful female walking, her motions becoming more smooth, her extended locks swaying with each stride. For a brief second, I failed to identify myself. And then the truth struck me. I was her. I was Hope. I stumbled, and a small surprised chuckle escaped my lips. It was a pleasing sound. Liam grinned. "There you go. You are mastering it." The subsequent stage involved garments. My former garments had been discarded. The medical center supplied an initial collection, a rack of items that appeared both appealing and alarming. For the initial several days, I clung to oversized relaxation trousers and gentle shirts. Anything that would conceal my fresh outline. I was still wrestling with the view of my own form, the contours, the gentleness. It was all so fresh, personal. One dawn, Liam entered with a friendly yet determined expression. "Dr. Reed's instructions. It is time to advance beyond relaxation attire." He arranged an ensemble on the sleeping area. It was basic. A set of dark wash slim trousers, a gentle cream-hued knit top, and a set of simple neutral undergarments. My eyes fixed on the support garment. It was a delicate lacy object. The notion of wearing it made my belly flutter with a nervous, energetic feeling. Dressing independently in my chamber proved a trial. The support garment was a riddle of bands and closures I could not solve. I struggled with it for 10 minutes, my face burning with irritation before finally managing to secure it. The sensation was odd, a mild pressure, a steady awareness of my fresh torso. Next came the undergarments. They were soft, smooth material, a breath of textile against my covering. It felt incredibly personal, almost shocking. Drawing on the slim trousers was another difficulty. I had only ever worn loose-fitting pants. The feeling of the thick material adhering to my limbs, my sides, my rear, it was a discovery. I could sense the contour of my form in a manner I never had before. When I finally drew the knit top over my head, I turned to the glass. The female returning my gaze was not wearing a disguise. She was simply a female dressing. The garments suited her. They appeared correct. The trousers emphasized the curve of her sides, and the knit top draped gracefully over her modest chest. I tentatively placed a hand on my side, copying a posture I had observed females adopt countless times. It felt surprisingly natural. "It is not merely the form that transforms," Dr. Reed had informed me during one of our meetings. "Your thoughts must adjust. Notice how you feel. Hope how you view yourself." I was beginning to grasp. As I stood there, I did not merely resemble a female. I was starting to sense like one. The embarrassment and dread remained, lingering in the edges of my thoughts, but they were being eclipsed by a growing sense of interest and even stimulation. Liam's instructions advanced. He brought a pair of modest elevated coverings. "Simply for practice," he said with a grin. "A rite of passage." They were frightening. I applied them, and immediately sensed I stood on elevated supports. My initial stride was a clumsy lurch, and I grasped onto the rear of a seat to avoid falling. I felt absurd, my ankles swaying, my form tense. I flushed intensely, sensing my cheeks warm. "Hey, no one masters it immediately," Liam said, his tone mild. He offered me his limb. "Here, let us attempt jointly." I cautiously accepted his limb, my fingers resting on his forearm. He was warm and stable. We paced gradually around the chamber, his presence a stabilizing power. With each stride, I sensed a tiny bit more assurance. I started to notice the way the elevated coverings alter my carriage, compelling me to stand taller, shifting my sides forward slightly. They produced a soft tapping noise on the flooring. It was a womanly noise, a potent noise. After a few minutes, I managed several strides independently. I was still unsteady, but I did not fall. I looked at Liam, and a genuine, unforced grin spread across my face. He smiled back, his eyes crinkling at the edges. "See, you are a natural." That evening, solitary in my chamber, I found myself replaying our interactions. The way he stabilized me, the way his hand felt on my limb, his effortless praises. As Kevin, I had been completely unnoticed by everyone. No one ever contacted me except accidentally. No one ever viewed me with that kind of mild attention. This was all fresh territory. My thoughts remained struggling to reconcile the previous with the fresh. The recollections of Kevin felt like a recording I had viewed long ago. But the feeling of Liam's hand on my limb, the sensation of smooth material against my covering, the view of hope in the glass, that felt genuine. That felt like the present. I lay in my sleeping area, tracing the fresh contours of my form through the thin coverings. A question echoed in the quiet of the chamber, a variation of the one I had posed before. Am I still Kevin, or am I truly becoming Hope this time? The answer felt a little nearer, a little clearer. Perhaps they were not two separate individuals. Perhaps Hope was the person Kevin had been concealing all along. The day I departed the medical center felt like my initial day on the planet. The project supplied me with a modest furnished dwelling in a peaceful section of the city, an empty surface on which to paint a fresh existence. Stepping out of the controlled setting of the medical center and onto an open pathway was paralyzing. The daylight felt excessively bright, the noises of movement too loud. Every individual who passed felt like an evaluator and jury. I was attired in the trousers and knit top I had grown familiar with, along with a pair of basic flat coverings. It was my protection, but I felt as exposed as though I were bare. I was extremely conscious of everything. The way my sides swayed when I moved, the way my extended locks brushed against my shoulders, the way males' eyes would glance over me. A casual assessing look I had never experienced as Kevin. That look was a complex matter. It was frightening, making me feel like a creature under examination. But it was also affirming. It was evidence that I was being noticed, that I existed. It was a dizzying blend of dread and a strange, thrilling sense of strength. My initial task was to purchase supplies. The market was a sensory excess. The overhead lighting seemed to place me on a platform. I seized a cart and clung to it like a rescue vessel. I moved through the pathways with my head lowered, attempting to minimize myself. But then, in the vegetable area, an aged male grinned at me. "Pardon me, miss," he said, reaching around me for a head of greens. "Mississippi," he addressed me as miss. The simple, ordinary politeness felt like a blessing. I experienced a surge of release so powerful it nearly weakened my joints. It was functioning. I was succeeding. Back in the security of my fresh dwelling, I unpacked the supplies and attempted to feel settled. The place was orderly and impersonal. It held no background, no spirits, just like me. I devoted the afternoon exploring my fresh image in every available surface. The bathing area glass, the darkened display of the viewing device, the polished cooking appliance. I was still adjusting to her, this female named Hope. One evening, Driven by a blend of idleness and a desire to feel more genuine, I sat at my computing device and entered preparation guidance for newcomers into a video network. A cheerful, youthful female appeared on the display, holding an intimidating collection of tools, implements, and selections. I had acquired a small initial set on my supply journey, my hands trembling as I placed the items in my basket. Following the recording, I clumsily navigated the steps. The base felt refreshing and odd on my covering. I blurred the lid shade, but the liner, that was the genuine difficulty. My hand shook as I attempted to trace a straight line along my lid. The first effort was a jagged, uneven disaster. I cleared it, drew a deep breath, and attempted again and again. On the fourth try, I achieved something resembling a clean line. I did the opposite eye, then carefully applied a layer of darkener, blinking as the tool brushed my lashes. When I finished, I leaned back and examined the glass. The change was subtle, but significant. The preparation did not make me resemble someone different. It made me resemble more like myself. It defined my eyes, added a touch of tint to my cheeks and lips. It was like increasing the intensity on a faded image. I looked completed. It was a covering. Yes, but it was a covering I had selected. One that helped me present the individual I wished to be to the world. It was another layer of my fresh identity, another element of the puzzle settling into position. A few weeks after settling in, I gathered the bravery to contact the sole individual from my previous existence I believed might comprehend, Tara. She had been my only genuine companion at the financial recording practice, a keen, amusing female who had occasionally attempted to pull the withdrawn Kevin out for after-duty beverages. I did not know how to commence the discussion. We met at a peaceful cafe in the Central District. I arrived early, my pulse racing a nervous rhythm against my ribs. When she entered, she scanned the space, her eyes gliding right across me. Naturally, they did. I drew a breath and rose. Tara. She turned, a polite, puzzled grin on her features. I apologize. Do I recognize you? My throat dried. It is me, Kevin. Her grin vanished. Her eyes enlarged as she examined my features, seeking a trace of the male she knew. I could see the precise moment the recognition connected, followed by a wave of pure incredulity. Her jaw literally dropped.
Kev, no.
No, it cannot be. She stammered, her eyes wide. It is, I said, my tone scarcely a murmur. We sat in stunned quiet for a long moment after the warm beverages arrived. I shared everything, the words pouring from me in a flood of dread and release. I described the dullness of my previous existence, the sensation of being a stranger in my own covering, the hope project, the metamorphosis. I expected her to rise and depart. I expected revulsion or fury or sympathy. Instead, after I had concluded, she simply stared at me, her face unreadable. Then, gradually, a small, hesitant grin touched her lips. Wow, she breathed. She reached across the surface and contacted my hand. Her contact was warm, genuine. So, hope. I nodded, moisture gathering in my eyes. Listen, she said, her tone softening. I am shocked. I will not pretend otherwise. But that individual I used to work with, Kevin, he was one of the most unhappy people I have ever encountered. She pressed my hand. If this is what it requires for you to be content, then I am here for you completely. Her acceptance was a present. It was the initial connection between my history and my present. It made me feel like I was not an elaborate deception. I was still the same individual inside, merely in a different package. Walking home from the cafe, I felt lighter than I had in my entire existence. For the initial time, I viewed the individuals passing by, not with dread, but with interest. I noticed a male across the pathway observing me, his expression showing open approval. In the past, that would have sent me into a spiral of alarm. But now, something different occurred. I sensed a flicker of assurance. I met his gaze for a brief second, then looked away, a small shy grin on my face. It was a fresh feeling. This sensation of being noticed, not with sympathy but with interest. It was captivating. But as I unlocked the entrance to my dwelling, a familiar solitude returned. Tara knew my private matter. But who else ever could? I had no background as Hope, no youthful images, no awkward adolescent recollections. I was an individual without a history. And as I examined my image in the passage glass, I wondered if an individual without a history could ever truly construct a future, or if I could ever permit someone to approach closely enough to see the spirit of the male I used to be. Beginning anew meant securing employment. The notion of returning to the dull world of financial recording was unbearable. So I took a risk. I applied for an entry position at a modest promotion agency in the Central District. Promotion concerned viewpoint, communication, and presenting a compelling narrative, everything I was attempting in my own existence. To my astonishment, after a nerve-testing discussion where I concentrated on my mostly invented independent work background, I obtained the position. The workplace was the complete opposite of my previous one. It was an open layout space, bright and noisy with discussion and creative vitality. For the initial time, I worked in an environment where individuals conversed, shared concepts, and chuckled. As a female, I was treated differently. Males held entrances for me. People sought my perspective in meetings. They grinned at me in the passages. It was a world removed from the courteous invisibility I had known as Kevin. It was there that I encountered Ethan. He was a visual creator with kind dark eyes, a light dusting of freckles across his nose, and a grin that seemed to extend all the way to his ears. He sat at a surface near mine, and from the initial day, he made effort to be amiable. He demonstrated how to operate the complex workplace warm beverage device, assisted me when my computing device stalled, and always inquired about my non-work days. His attention was confusing. My form had a physical response to him that my thoughts did not know how to handle. When he leaned over my shoulder to view my display, the faint aroma of his scent would make my belly perform a small twist. When he grinned at me, a warmth would spread through my chest, and I could sense the flush rising in my cheeks. Dr. Reed had cautioned me about this. Your chemical profile is now female. Hope, you will experience sensations and attractions with a new strength. It is biology. The key is to comprehend it. But this did not feel like merely biology. It felt personal. I was attracted to Ethan's kindness, his relaxed assurance, his creativity. But every time he was kind to me, a voice of alarm would shout in my head. He is being kind to Hope. He would be repelled if he knew about Kevin. One Friday, a group from the workplace went out for beverages after duties. I was hesitant, but Tara's tone echoed in my head, encouraging me to live the existence I had selected. So I went. I wore a basic black gown and the modest elevations I had practiced moving in. It was the most dressed up I had ever been in open spaces. The establishment was crowded and loud. I mostly listened, too nervous to add much to the discussion. Ethan sat beside me. At one point, he leaned closer to be heard over the music. "You are pretty reserved," he said, his tone warm. "Still adjusting." "Something like that," I replied, my speech a little unsteady. He studied my features for a moment, a thoughtful expression in his eyes. "You know," he said, his tone lowering slightly, becoming more personal. "You have eyes that appear like they're sharing a narrative." The remark struck me with the impact of a physical hit. My breath caught. Kevin's eyes had been dull, empty openings. They had no narrative to share. But Hope's eyes, perhaps they did. They held the narrative of a male who vanished and a female who was born. A narrative of dread and metamorphosis, and a desperate grasping path toward the illumination. My face flushed a deep crimson. I had no idea how to reply. I simply looked downward at my beverage, my heart racing in my chest. "Thank you," I managed to stammer. He simply grinned as though my flustered response was exactly what he had hoped for. He did not press. He simply returned to the group discussion, leaving me in a state of emotional chaos. The journey home that evening was a storm of conflicting sensations. His words replayed repeatedly in my thoughts. He saw a narrative in my eyes. He saw depth. He saw me, or at least the me I was attempting to become. This feeling of being noticed, truly noticed as a female, was the most addictive and frightening thing I had ever experienced. When I reached my dwelling, I went directly to the glass. I looked into my own eyes, searching for what Ethan had seen. The eyes returning my gaze were still mine, but they were different now. They held a spark of vitality, a hint of a history, a glimmer of a future. They were the eyes of a female who was beginning to believe in her own existence. But the dread remained, a cold flow beneath the warmth of his praise. This growing attraction to Ethan felt like a beautiful, fragile glass creation. I was frightened that if I made one incorrect movement, if I permitted him to approach too closely, he would see the fractures. He would see the spirit of Kevin lingering behind Hope's eyes, and the entire illusion would break. I sat on the border of my sleeping area, my head in my hands. I had fled from myself, altered my entire being to escape a life of solitude. But what if I had simply exchanged one form of isolation for another? I had constructed this fresh identity, this fresh existence, layer by layer. But it was all constructed on a foundation of secrecy. I was caught in a contradiction. The very act of becoming someone different was finally permitting me to feel like my genuine self. But could a self constructed on such a profound private matter ever be truly complete or truly cherished? The better my existence as Hope became, the more the unresolved history with my family nagged at me. I was constructing a future, but it felt like constructing a dwelling on a cliff border. My parents believed their son Kevin was on an extended professional assignment overseas. The falsehood I had created with the medical center's assistance before I vanished. But the falsehood was temporary, and the guilt was lasting. They deserved the truth, or at least my truth. I knew it would be the most difficult discussion of my existence, but I also knew I could not fully advance until I had it. I arranged the visit for a Saturday, driving the 3 hours to my quiet suburban hometown in a rented vehicle. With every mile that passed, the assurance I had developed as Hope chipped away, leaving behind the raw, fearful person I had always been. I had practiced what I would say 100 times in my head, but as I turned onto their familiar road, the words vanished, replaced by a cold, hard knot of dread in my belly. I parked the vehicle and simply sat for a minute, viewing the dwelling I grew up in, the neat grass, the cheerful yellow entrance. It all appeared so painfully ordinary, a snapshot from an existence that was no longer mine. I wore a reserved ensemble, a modest shirt, dark trousers, and flat coverings. I had secured my locks back. I wanted to appear as non-threatening, as serious as possible. Drawing a deep breath, I walked up the pathway and signaled the entrance. My heart felt ready to escape my chest. My mother opened the entrance. She appeared older than I recalled, her features marked with new lines of concern. She offered me a polite, questioning grin. "Can I assist you?" My tone was a strangled murmur. "Mom, it is me." Confusion clouded her features. She squinted, searching my face. And then I saw it, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. A growing horror that made her face pale. She recognized the eyes. My eyes. "No," she breathed, her hand flying to her mouth. "It cannot be." My father appeared behind her, drawn by the quiet. "What is it, Carol?" He looked at me, a stranger on his doorstep, with irritation. "Who is this?" "It is Kevin," my mother whispered, her tone trembling. My father's face went from puzzlement to a deep stormy fury. His expression hardened into a mask of stone. He examined me up and down, his eyes filled with a revulsion so profound it felt like a physical strike. He did not invite me inside. He simply stared. The discussion, when it finally occurred, was in the sterile formality of their family area. I sat on the border of the sofa, my hands clenched in my lap. My mother sat opposite me, weeping silently into a cloth. My father stood near the hearth, his back rigid, refusing to even view me. I share my account. I attempted to explain the decades of sensing incorrect, of being a spirit in my own form. I told them about the soul-crushing solitude, the sensation of being an imposter every single day of my existence. I tried to make them understand that this was not a selection I made lightly, but a desperate act of survival. When I finished, the quiet was heavy, smothering. My mother's sobs were the only noise. Finally, my father spoke, his tone low and frigid, each word a fragment of frost. "We had a son," he said, his gaze fixed on the wall above my head. "We named him Kevin. We raised him. And now he is gone." He finally turned to look at me, his eyes burning with a cold fire. "You did not simply change. You eliminated him. You eliminated our son." The words shattered me. A raw, guttural sob escaped my lips. "No," I cried, the moisture I had been containing now streaming down my face. "I did not eliminate him. I did not eliminate anyone." I looked from my father's stony face to my mother's crumpled one, pleading with them to understand. My tone was shaking, but it found a strength I never knew I possessed. That individual, Kevin, he was never meant to be. He was a cage. I did not eliminate him. I simply released him. I set him free, so I could finally exist. I gestured to myself, to my face, my form. This is me. This is who I was supposed to be all along. My father simply shook his head, a look of finality on his face. He turned and walked out of the chamber. The sound of his footsteps ascending the stairs was like a judge's gavel falling. The decision was in. I was condemned. I was left alone with my mother. She continued to weep, her shoulders shaking. I thought she would follow him. I thought I had lost them both. I rose, prepared to depart, to retreat back to my fresh existence and accept that my history was gone for good. But as I moved toward the entrance, my mother suddenly raised her eyes. Her eyes were red and swollen, but through the sorrow, I saw something else. A flicker of affection. The stubborn, unconditional affection of a mother that even this impossible situation could not entirely extinguish. She rose and rushed toward me. She threw her arms around me, drawing me into a fierce, desperate embrace. She was shorter than me now, and it felt strange to have her resting her head on my shoulder. She held on to me tightly, as though afraid I might vanish. "My child," she sobbed into my shoulder. "My beautiful child." She drew back, her hands framing my face, her thumbs clearing my tears. "I do not understand this. I do not. But if this is who you are now, then I still love you. I still love my child." Her words were the forgiveness I did not know I was so desperate to hear. It was not full acceptance. It was not a joyful conclusion. My father was lost to me, perhaps forever. But my mother still saw me through the fresh face, the fresh form, the fresh title. She saw her child. And in that instant, in that grief-filled, tearful embrace, it was sufficient. It was more than sufficient. It was everything. The drive back to the city was different. The dread had vanished, replaced by a strange, quiet sense of tranquility. The confrontation had been harsh. The injury from my father's rejection was deep and raw. But my mother's embrace had been a powerful balm. I had faced the spirits of my history. I had not defeated them, but I had survived them. I had stood in the ruins of my old existence and claimed my fresh one. I was not concealing anymore. Back in my dwelling, the quiet did not feel lonely. It felt peaceful. I sensed a profound shift inside me. The constant nagging internal battle between Kevin and Hope had finally quieted. There was no more conflict. Kevin was not a spirit to be embarrassed about. He was a recollection, a prelude. He was the caterpillar, and I was the butterfly. One could not exist without the other. A few days afterward, I started a personal record. I wanted to document this fresh existence, not just for myself, but as evidence of the path. My initial entry was simple. For 32 years, my title was Kevin. He was a decent male, but he was a sorrowful male. He lived his existence in the shadows, fearful of his own image. He was the individual everyone looked through, but no one ever noticed. Today, my title is Hope. I am not a substitute. I am a revelation. I am the person Kevin was always meant to become. He was not erased. He was finally liberated. He was the one who concealed. I am the one who exists. Work felt different also. I entered the workplace with a fresh assurance, a fresh sense of self-possession. Ethan noticed it immediately. "You seem altered," he said, leaning against my surface with his morning warm beverage. "Good. Altered. Lighter." I grinned. A real genuine grin that reached my eyes. "I feel lighter." The dread I had held about him, about anyone, approaching closely, began to recede. My private matter was still mine, but it no longer felt like a shameful, dirty thing. It was simply my narrative. A complex, unbelievable narrative, but mine nonetheless. One evening, I received a secure message from the medical center. It was from Dr. Reed. "Hope. We are conducting our 1-year follow-up evaluations. Your records indicate that you have successfully integrated into your fresh existence. Your advancement is considered a standard success for the project. I have only one official inquiry for the records, and I ask that you answer it truthfully. Do you have any regrets?" I read the message and moved over to the large glass in my sleeping area. For years, glasses had been my adversary. They had shown me an unknown person, a confinement, a letdown. But now I looked at my image and I saw a companion. I saw hope. I saw her hazel eyes, which Ethan was correct, did share a narrative. I saw the curve of her grin. I saw the strength in her carriage. She was wearing a simple blue gown, and she looked content. She looked genuine. She looked like me. I reflected on Kevin, about the dull workspace enclosure in the silent dwelling. I reflected on the dread, the pain of the metamorphosis, the terror of stepping out into the world for the initial time. I reflected on my father's rejection and my mother's tears. And I reflected on the sensation of the daylight on my covering, the sound of Tara's amusement, the warmth in Ethan's gaze, the simple delight of feeling correct in my own form. Regrets. I picked up my device and typed my reply to Dr. Reed. No, I have no regrets. My only regret is that I waited so long to do it. I pressed send. A grin spread across my face. I grabbed a light jacket and my keys and walked out of my dwelling. Not to go anywhere particular, but just to be in the world. It was a cool evening, and a breeze was sweeping through the city pathways, carrying the aroma of rain and exhaust and vitality. I walked to the corner and waited for the signal to change. As I stood there, a gust of wind caught my extended locks, whipping it around my face in a wild, dark cloud. I did not brush it away. I simply closed my eyes and tilted my face upward to the sky, sensing the strands dance and tangle in the air. For the initial time in my existence, I felt completely, utterly, and gloriously liberated. The male in the glass was gone. The female in the wind was here, and her name was Hope.